man I worked for had one of the biggest companies in New York City. He didn't own his own company. White man owned it, so they owned him. Nobody owns me, though.
A-D-N.
It's Headphones Neil!
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Headphones Neil Reviews and part 2 of 2 for my character spotlight review of Denzel Washington. So this review is going to be my review for the 2007 film American Gangster, and my second equally favorite film as far as Denzel Washington films go. And this comes on the heel of the recent news that Michael B. Jordan may potentially be playing the same character of Alonzo from Training Day in a prequel film to show how that same character portrayed by Denzel Washington in Training Day got to that point. So I thought that news was particularly relevant. So that doesn't really affect my review. It's neither here nor there, but it will be intriguing to see if they too come up with that origin story of a film. So going back to my review for American Gangster, overall it is a very good film, notably in that it is a period piece that's based on the events around Bumpy Johnson, a drug dealer in Harlem in, now I want to say the 60s, but basically him, and then how his driver in the form of Frank Lucas, played by Denzel Washington, comes to power and prominence after the death of Bumpy Johnson. So I liked that progression that we see, that notably in Frank Lucas's rise as he works on consolidating the organization under his own name, how he wants to collect on the debts of Bumpy Johnson, how he interacts with various other gangsters, how he used the lessons that Bumpy taught him to create his own drug dealing empire. And I thought that was an interesting concept and presentation when they have in the beginning how Bumpy Johnson is teaching Frank about how no one takes pride in ownership and everyone's cutting out the middleman. But Frank Lucas merges the two ideas in that he's creating this new drug, black magic, that's the purest form of heroin. And he also wants to take pride in ownership, which comes into play later on when he goes to, I want to say, Nicky, the gangster drug dealer played by Cuba Gooding Jr., and has a whole speech about trademark and copyright and how Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character is infringing on blue magic by cutting it up and then still selling it under the same name, and how no one cares about who the CEO of any particular brand is. They just care that if you see Pepsi or Coke, that's exactly what you're gonna get when you buy it, and they don't allow for any knockoffs or they don't allow for anyone else using that name in the form of a knockoff. So the film had a lot of little connections there that they stuck to and paid off well throughout the film. Especially also with the Italian, I want to say, gangster guy, played by Armando Sante, who tells Frank Lucas about needing protection and peace of mind and setting up the organization. And it comes full circle later after Frank Lucas's wife gets shot at. So they talk about the whole peace of mind thing, but then also my other favorite line as far as about success taking a shot at Frank Lucas and becoming unsuccessful and having friends, or being successful and having enemies. So kind of that counterpoints kind of along the lines of what did Frank Lucas learn or understand or expect by becoming successful. So one of those things where there's a lot of point and counterpoints. And then progressively throughout the film, so while Frank is having his rise in the drug dealing underworld and going to the jungles of, I want to say Vietnam. I think actually I didn't pay it because I think it was around the time of the Vietnam War. And buying direct from the source, we have all of that, and then we have Richie, played by the gladiator guy Russell Crowe, and his rise through the basically showing his character by not taking the money that they found in the car and becoming a pariah in the department, ultimately setting up their special department for big time drug dealers and narcotics and things like that. So ultimately becoming a lawyer, his personal struggles as far as his family life with his wife and son, and the poor choices he made in his past coming back to haunt him, but wanting to now do right to become a good cop, be a good lawyer, and all of that stuff. And not ultimately meeting Frank Lucas till the end of the film, which according to the trivia was they did that intentionally to have a better on-screen chemistry by the time they did meet at the end of the film outside the church. So all good parts of the film, there were a lot of good points and counterpoints. They did a lot of good switching back and forth between the stories. While I don't know if they had equal screen time, it did feel like every character, and notably Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe, felt like they had about equal screen time. So it didn't feel like either one had any more or less time. It didn't feel like their stories were underdeveloped. You can see the rise and fall of Frank Lucas, and ultimately things like the little details, like when Frank's brother buys the expensive suit and Frank Lucas tells him about how the noisiest person in the room is the weakest person. And when Frank goes to the boxing match, he's wearing the fur coat that his wife bought him. So that is ultimately his demise, and he forgot his own rules of surviving in the game. So overall, like I said, it was a very good movie. It's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. In this case, I did watch the extended version, and I think now that I'm pretty sure I've seen the extended version before, but I couldn't tell you what was added versus the original theatrical cut of the film. But overall, in either case, the film flows very well. So you do, for example, have their opening scenes with Frank Lucas and Bumpy Johnson. You have the points of Frank growing his organization with his family. You have Russell Crowe's character figuring out the organization with his narcotics department. Later, as far as which brother runs what out of each borough, and all of that stuff. So definitely worth the film is worth the watch. So as far as grading it, I definitely give it an A. It is a very good film. It is worth watching. At around just under 3 hours, it is a very long film. And not to say that there aren't down points in the film, but overall, when you're watching the film, the stare that Denzel Washington has perfected. So in Training Day, it was a stare that's trying to convince you that his words are there to convince you that he's doing the right thing, but you're actually doing something evil or bad or basically not right. You're basically trying to have you go against your morals, but acting like those are your morals and his way is in your best interest. His stares in American Gangster, the way he's thinking before he ends with my man, it's more of an analytical stare. He's observing, he's learning, he's paying attention, he's taking note of how people are acting and reacting. It's one of those things that's notable in all the details in the film, but kind of like when the gangster is asking Frank Lucas for his 20%, and Denzel Washington talks about his profits and how he's not going to make any money and all of that, but they come back around and Frank Lucas gives him the 20% after shooting him. So things like that. So you can see how Frank Lucas was able to rise just by paying attention, listening, learning, remembering, and all of that. And you get the idea of how good his memory is based on when he moves his family into their house and he shows his mom the dresser that he remembered and had rebuilt from scratch, that I guess it burned down when he was a child, but still remembered every single detail. So that's the reason I would say to watch American Gangster, is because of all those little details that they pay attention to. Watching the theatrical cut or the extended edition, you generally get the same feel and experience. There's extended scenes and things like that that potentially help the film, but watching the theatrical cut is not hurt by not having those films. It's, little details here and there that are expanded, and certain scenes that are expanded rather than scenes that are not in the film or scenes that you're going to miss by not watching the extended cut. So there's that. So as far as comparing Training Day to American Gangster, I would probably give American Gangster the slight edge over Training Day, just because it is a more expanded film, but it's kind of comparing, microeconomics to macroeconomics, where American Gangster is more on the macro scale. There's a lot more going on as far as world building, interactions with different people, and how far Frank Lucas's character has to go as far as building the organization with his family, going to China, distribution and selling, other gangsters, competition, and all of that. Whereas Training Day is more on the micro scale. It's more of a one-on-one personal film between him and Ethan Hawke's character. And there is some world building as far as having the overarching story with the Russians, having his team go in and help him to get the money with the drug dealer that they have taken off the streets, meeting with the wise men and things like that. The various gangs or the various blocks that he's ruling over, as far as the Damus, I think it was, and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of why it's hard to compare the films, and why I think Denzel Washington's character plays them both equally well, because of the the quiet intensity that he brings to both characters, but is not overpowering or underpowering because of his star power. So watching them, you do have two different films, but like I said, American Gangster is more on the macro scale as far as scope and depth and breadth and width, whereas Training Day is on the micro scale with one-on-one, like building the personal relationships between him and Ethan Hawke and the various other characters that they meet up with in the film. So that's all there is for this particular review. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything like that, and feedback on your own, or maybe you want to share your thoughts on either film, which one you liked more or less, or why you liked them or didn't like them, or anything like that, you can find me on Twitter at PatelN01. If you're a supporter of the show on Patreon at patreon.com/PatelN01, you can get the show ad-free there, along with commenting on the post as well. And of course, the website is headphonesneil.reviews for past episodes, subscription links, supporting all options to support the show, and all of that good stuff. But that is all for this particular episode. Thanks for tuning in.